We get the next interest rate decision from the Bank of Canada tomorrow. Generally, the market thinks they'll stand pat, but these rising interest rates, 10 increases, have put upward pressure on variable rate mortgages, for example. That's made life more difficult for leveraged homeowners with a lot of debt. What is Canada to do about this problem, this cruel problem of housing affordability? People can't get rental, people can't afford to live in many areas. Our guest has had a long career in Canadian politics, now vice chair of global investment banking at CIBC, former federal cabinet minister Lisa Raitt. Great to see you.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to be here.
Give us you say that we've got to get past a partisan approach and also a jurisdictional, no, it's their responsibility, it's theirs, and try to work together on this thing.
We are on a burning platform right now. And it's, a little bit of it has to do with the higher rates of immigration. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's a great demand. Not a lot of people necessarily were building at the time of the pandemic. So when the solution providers come together, what we're saying is we need to do this in a way that is going to take account of the fact that there's partisan politics at play, that there's different jurisdictions at play. You have all kinds of orders of government, and not do the finger pointing at each other, but instead work together to come up with solutions. It
would be great, even at the federal level, if Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau could in some way say, this is like, we need a wartime measures here almost, and that kind of solidarity to deal with this thing.
I agree with you. And the only entity that can put the pressure on different political parties to do that is the voter and the taxpayer. If they say, look, we want you guys to work together on this, it actually does work. It kind of informs the policy making. Now, is Mr. Poilievre ever going to say, I think Justin's doing the right thing? Probably not likely, Andrew. But that being said, there is an opportunity. Scott Atkinson, actually, who is in the Conservative caucus, has been doing a lot of work in this space for a long time. Maybe Sean Fraser will listen to a couple of his suggestions.
The federal housing minister.
That's right. Yeah. And maybe he'll listen to a couple of those suggestions. And I know that those guys can work together across the aisle to try to come up with stuff that makes sense.
That would be exciting, wouldn't it? Because you get so tired of this sniping. And
well, exactly. I mean, that's the theater of it all. But once you step back, you got to come up with solutions. And Canadians, you said it at the top, Canadians are hurting, and they are terrified of their next time of renegotiating their mortgage. They're terrified of it. They don't know what it means. And then folks who have kids like I do, who are 22 years old, they say, well, Mom, I'm going to move to the States where I can buy a house.
Wow.
I mean, that guts me. I don't want to have that happening.
No.
So we all have a vested interest in figuring out how we're going to solve this affordability situation, but as well, complete lack of supply in certain areas of the country.
Policy-wise, Sheila Copps joined us on the channel. She's a former Liberal cabinet minister. Her take is that back in the 80s, and I don't even remember who was in office back then, was involved in this. The federal government passed this off to the provinces, and only in 2017 has the federal government got involved again in housing.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to the time that I served in government. That was 08 to 15. And we really didn't have a big place when we were talking about housing. I mean, we had an associate minister who dealt with that kind of stuff. But the reality is that we did view it as provincial jurisdiction. We would give large sums that would be transferred to the provinces to deal with it. But it's such a ubiquitous problem that everybody expects everyone to work together on it. So that's kind of why, we're thinking about having different groups of people come together from different political stripes, from different orders of government, to try to just come up with some policy ideas that you can present to every order of government in the country.
I'm trying to think. I mean, the critics of the current system say that owners of houses are favoured at the expense of renters. And obviously that principal residence tax exemption, you can sell it tax-free. Would any government mess with that at their peril?
At their peril. I remember in the 2019 campaign, there was a whisper that the Liberals were thinking of getting rid of the capital gains. And, the Conservatives just ran hard on that. And the Liberals came out and said, no, we're not thinking about that at all, because it is death. It is the third rail in politics. But how do you balance a system where those who have houses have gained from the increase in value, and those who want to get into the market can't because of the increase in value? So it's a balancing act, and you really all have to kind of agree that a solution has to be had. Otherwise, we have lots of dangers of losing population and of losing economic long-term growth, which is what we need in the country.
Sheila Copps argued that the houses people have these days are much, well, they're bigger than you would get in Britain and bigger than our parents or grandparents have.
Yeah.
Is it time for people to acknowledge, hey, I may have a smaller living space, that big 2-car garage that maybe just not on?
I think so. I think people are trying to figure out what it is going to make their lives more livable. I grew up in Cape Breton, and I grew up in a house that had 6 kids, and I wondered how the heck did they have 6 kids in this house with 3 bedrooms? I mean, it's when you think of, and no basement. So you make do, and it's that is the reality. And maybe folks will come around to that kind of thing, and certainly increasing density and allowing more livable space on units and areas that municipalities can do right away. That makes a lot of sense.
The thing with a smaller house, I think, is less maintenance, less.
Yeah, 100%, and less to heat. I mean, you know, the old adage: you drive by a beautiful home and you say, "Oh, isn't that a gorgeous home?" And they say, "I hate to have that power bill."
Yeah.
So it's better.
What else do you remember from your time in cabinet? As you say, the federal government didn't have a big role in housing. I mean, it was involved in Indigenous housing and stuff.
Yeah. And we we made transfers into affordable housing, and we made sure that we were there for announcements, but no big strategy in terms of housing, because we thought the provinces. But we were also the government that actually had lower immigration. This government, this federal government, has really opened the doors to immigration in a significant way. And we see the numbers in terms of both international students and both newcomers to the country, which is great and fine and perfect. And we all agree that that's important. But then you got to supply the supports. And one of the supports is housing. So by the mere factor that immigration has been opened up so widely, there is a proper role for a federal government here, and there should be.
What about the colleges and universities?
Yeah.
Should we be harder on them, saying you should be providing housing for all these students you're bringing in? So
it's a new phenomenon. I think they're going to have to figure out how to go through it, but it's a great way to bring educated newcomers into the country. That's going to help build our workforce. So I'm not there. I'm not in the finger pointing saying that colleges and universities are a problem. I think more to the point is this is a factor we need to consider when we're thinking about housing writ large in the country.
Yeah, because I mean, these international students, I don't think they're asking a lot, just somewhere clean and safe and decent.
And to come to this beautiful country.